Well, John, Egbert has not fired us yet, so I guess we're
here.
We're
It's
here.
amazing.
We're here for another show. Egbert, the new owner of the radio station. Egburt. You want to check him out, egbert.com. Matter of fact, it's sort of interesting. Egbert is a man about town. He's he's here, there, and everywhere. So anyway, we'll talk about that later. It is Tuesday, December 19th. It is, 6 days till Christmas?
It is, 6 days. Yeah,
6
a
days
week
to
from
Christmas.
today, we will be coming down from our Christmas high.
Now,
And a week from today is the first day of Kwanzaa, Brad. So happy early
We
Kwanzaa
have
to
to
you. You know
make
that
sure.
date is very important to me.
right. Did we miss Festivus? Is that in there somewhere too?
I think Festivus is more whenever the feeling strikes, Brad. And technically, since it's an airing of grievances,
Yeah.
that's what you and I do from Monday through Friday from
Well,
7 to 8 a.m. every day.
Well, yeah, we talk about all sorts of crazy stuff. John Combest is the guy who runs the johncombest.com website, COMBEST, common name on the first, JOHN, johncombest.com. And, I get so distracted. I'm like a little kid sometimes. I'm, like squirrel, that kind of thing. Yesterday, we were supposed to do the top three in the first segment of the show, right at the top of the show. And yesterday, we didn't do it till the second segment, which was my fault. So without further ado, don't you like that? Here's John Combest with the top three, starting with number 3. These are the most important, according to John, which are on his site today. The 3 biggest stories in the state of Missouri for politics, political-wise, whatever you want to look at it.
Number 3, we will start with something that will be a trend at least through next August, which is statewide media discovering the joy that is Bill Eigel. 2 newspapers today. Bill Eigel, as many of you know, is from Weldon Spring in St. Charles County. And both the Kansas City Star and the Springfield News Leader have profiles, I'd call them mini profiles today, on Bill Eigel, focusing on his legislation. The highlight to me was the fact that the Kansas City Star reporter described Bill Eigel and his compatriots in the Missouri Senate as, quote, noisy, unquote. So the joy of this, again, is that folks outside of the St. Louis metro region will be discovering the joy that is Bill Eigel, and he is sure to surprise and delight reporters who haven't had much contact with him.
See, and here's what's sad about it. I actually like the guy.
Yeah, I understand. I know.
He's a very likable kind of guy. Has a good personality. And I will say in full disclosure, once upon a time he was a client on this very radio station. He advertised his business called St. Louis Skylights. He sold the business, went into politics. I had absolutely positively great relationship with him. As a client, he was always very good to me. We always had great conversations. He did a great job with his company. Just a good guy. Now, The problem is, I think that this is one of the things in media that he's gotten this maybe non-deserved reputation as being sort of a little bit on the nutty side, super right wing. Would that be a proper way to sort of put it?
Yeah, and the rest of the sentence today that the Kansas City Star reporter chose to create was, he's one of the de facto leaders of a noisy hard right faction.
Yeah.
So that's the reputation. But also, Brad, I think that's when you're him and you're running against 2 folks that have been around Jefferson City for a long time, Mike Kehoe and Jay Ashcroft. You've got to do something to make noise.
Well, yeah.
And if you're not noisy, who's going to pay attention to you?
And he's sort of the outsider insider, if that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. And he would embrace that. If he was on with us today, he would point out that he is the underdog.
Yeah.
And he likes that role.
Right.
You want to be punching up when you're a relatively unknown candidate in a statewide race.
Well, especially with Ashcroft being second generation, politician,
Absolutely.
as far as his father. Keogh, not the situation whatsoever. He's essentially a self-made person as far as his political situation is concerned. And, once again, they are, nameplates, whatever you want to call it, in Jefferson City, whereas Bill is not. Bill is an east central Missouri kind of guy, lives in St. Charles. I'm trying to think, does he live in St. Charles County?
Yeah, he's Weldon Spring.
That's right. Okay, what am I thinking? I mean, I thought for a while he lived in St. Louis County somewhere. Okay, anyway, that's Bill Eigel.
Yeah, so that's the number 3 story. The number 2 story.
Maybe tomorrow we'll call him
the
and see what
online
happens.
publication Politico, which is based out of Washington D.C., has a story about the national trend of certain states attempting to put pro-choice language on the ballot in different states. Missouri is one of those states where pro-choice activists are talking about putting a statewide referendum on the ballot to make abortion legal through the state constitution. Now, this has been a story for a while. The interesting thing about the Politico piece is that the woman who runs a group called Abortion Action Missouri says that investors, and that's the word she uses, is investors, may not choose to invest in Missouri because the hurdle to get on the ballot may be so high and the timeline so compressed that pro-choice or pro-abortion, they like to be called pro-abortion now. I don't know if you're aware of that trend, Brad. They don't just want to be pro-choice. They want to be called pro-abortion. Pro-abortion activists want to put this on the ballot, and they have a limited timeline because even if they started tomorrow, they have to submit at least by May to get on the November ballot. So the timeline's really compressed. So the interesting thing is that, and we've seen this before from a spokesman for the ACLU was quoted in the liberal publication Mother Jones by doubting the fact that Missouri may see huge money. And, a $30 million figure is one that's been floated based on what it costs to get the measure passed in Ohio. So it's an interesting development, and that the pro-choice folks claim that the public is on their side, yet they're indicating now that their abortion industry investors might not invest in Missouri.
Interesting.
And the number one story today throughout all newspapers in Missouri is that the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, also known as DESE, released their rankings, essentially their assessments of school districts throughout Missouri. That includes public schools and then public charter schools, and talk a little bit about which ones are accredited, how the schools have progressed. And the main takeaway from it is that the department is acknowledging that schools are still trying to dig out from the hole that was created by the COVID pandemic shutdowns. So every newspaper throughout Missouri most newspapers throughout Missouri are working on a local angle to this. That news coverage is up today on my website, but also you'll see tomorrow and throughout the weekend as the reporters dig a little bit deeper into those numbers.
And I have to tell you, I read a couple different articles. I read the Post-Dispatch article. I read the Missouri Independent article. As a parent, I'm glad my kids are no longer in school. Can I be honest with you? Now, you got kids in school. How do you feel about this?
First of all, the shutdowns during the pandemic and absolutely shutting down face-to-face instruction. It's one of those things that sounded so good in 2020 when we were in the 2 weeks to stop the spread. And a lot of people were saying, look, this is a horrible idea. And now we're paying for it.
The hindsight's 2020. It's always 2020.
Yep.
You look back at things right now, and I've had this happen several times with people that I know, business-wise, personally, and things like that, where you say something about, I think I'm maybe getting a cold, and then comment will come up, hey, have you gotten your booster shots? And people laugh about that now,
Yeah.
I mean, you've never taken any of the shots, correct?
Absolutely not.
Now, I took the first two, and believe it or not, I had to drive. I told the story. I had to drive to Raymore, Missouri twice. And if you know where Raymore is,
on the western side of the state.
Well, you can't get much western than that because you go about a mile west of there, and you're in Kansas. It's south of Kansas City, but it's the extreme west part of the state. And now it's to the point where who in the world got their boosters? I mean, the whole crazy thing.
What we see, though, Brad, and folks have gone to my website, have seen this over the last couple of weeks, the local health officials and the local health quote-unquote experts, like the mini Faucis in every community, are, when it comes to holiday time, every year, 2022, 2023, they want to be back in the news. And it allows them to get on their local public radio station and reach out to their local television reporter and news reporter and say, no, but this time it's different. this time this variant is really bad, and you guys got to go get the booster. You got to get the shot. Listen to me. Pay attention to me. And it's a cottage industry for these folks. They tasted a little bit of fame, Brad, in 2020 and 2021, and they'll never get over the fact that they'll never be that famous again.
Little bit of fame? You mean like Dr. Fauci kind of fame? I mean,
Dr. Well, and in their local communities. Think about the guy. Who was the guy in St. Louis that loved himself?
Oh, that was
a lot.
There
know
was
who I'm talking about?
There were a couple of them. The one guy was from St. Louis County, and he was the guy.
Not the guy that pretended to be victimized by the crowd, but there was a guy that was like a mini Fauci.
Yeah. He worked for St. Louis County. He wasn't. And there was a guy, because he used to be on every talk station, every radio.
Yes.
97.1 used to have him on. KMOX had him on. And, what's sort of crazy about it is 97.1 had this one doctor, and I can't remember what his name was. I have to look that up. And they had him on all the time, and he was the most reasoned voice I heard about this whole thing. People would call him. He would sort of give both sides of the equation. He would say, well, if you believe blah, 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 blah. If you don't, I'm going like, I like this guy. Yeah. Because he's essentially saying, this is what you're hearing from essentially the federal government, vis-a-vis, Dr. Fauci, and this is what the medical community says. They agree with some of the things that the federal government is saying, but we disagree with other things, and you go through the whole crazy thing. Now, let me backtrack on a couple different things you have there.
Yeah, sure.
Number two, when do you think the Republicans will learn about the fact that if they embrace this abortion issue as hard as they do, they're never going to get elected anymore?
You mean if they go to the pro-life position of no exceptions, that they'll never get elected?
Well, okay, I've got 4 kids, okay? Mm-hmm. I can't imagine not having those 4 kids, okay? And I say that sounds sort of weird, but there's a situation. It's almost like, It's a Wonderful Life or Back to the Future, where you look at like what could have happened if this happened, 20 years ago before I had my kids. You know what I mean? That kind of a thing. And by the same token, I'm not a guy that's like, hey, we need to have abortion. But by the same token, the Texas case to me cries out to the rest of the country, see what happens when you nutbags put in this really super strict law. The whole crazy thing. There's a story about a woman, and I think she actually had to leave Texas to get an abortion, who her doctor said to her, your baby has a fatal defect. A fatal fetal defect, if you want to look at it that way. Your baby is not going to be born alive. Matter of fact, there may be complications to you by, keeping this pregnancy going. And she tried to get an abortion in Texas, and they said, no way can you get an abortion. The law says no exceptions, no exceptions, no exceptions. And to me, it's like, okay, hold on a minute. It's almost like zero tolerance.
But so, Brad, when you talk about when will Republicans learn, when you say Republicans, like if you talk about them as a monolith, if you talk about them as one group, that's like saying, when will the Democrats learn to stop saying defund the police? So there's people that when you say Republicans, there are campaign consultants that make a career out of getting people elected. And that's a different group, Brad, than people who are involved in politics. There's a guy named Sam Lee who's been involved in pro-life efforts for, I think, about 40 years. There's a difference between the Sam Lees, whose main issue is pro-life, and somebody who's 40 years old who makes their money by getting Republicans elected. So when you say, when will Republicans learn, Sam Lee would call himself a Republican, and he's like, I'm not giving an inch on abortion. Now, the interesting thing, Brad, is that last week there were proposals 2 weeks ago when legislators could introduce legislation or pre-file legislation in Missouri, there were 2 legislators that proposed a bill suggesting that women that get an abortion be charged with murder. I don't know if you saw this.
Yeah.
So
I thought
they're
to
both
myself,
from the southwest part of the state.
Here we go again.
Missouri's pro-life groups came out and said they opposed that bill. And their point, Brad, was that if you do something extreme, like saying, hey, women who get an abortion should be charged with murder and subjected to the death penalty, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's punitive. And also, by the way, it draws people away from the cause. So that's essentially what you're saying. But what you're saying is that Republicans shouldn't run on this.
No.
You get my point, though? There's a difference between people who are charged with running campaigns and winning elections and people who care about the pro-life issue because it's their issue. It's why they're involved in campaigns.
Absolutely, positively, 100%. I hear what you're saying, and I know, I agree with what you're saying. But you're talking to a guy who has been in the radio industry for a long time, okay? Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting things is when Shelley and I used to do the BS.show show, that sounds weird, the BS, what do you call it? It's BS.show, the BS.show. Anyway, one of the things I used to always tell her was, it's the radio and a lot of things in life are like the Jay Leno street walking thing. If you walk down the street and you randomly walk up to a person and say, hey, who's the president of the United States? There's going to be a segment of those people who have no idea who the president is.
Absolutely, for sure.
And you're going like, how can you live in this country? How can you not pay attention to the fact that the guy's picture is on the front page of every news site every single day? He gets, mentioned by pro-con every single day, and you don't know who he is. Now, going back to the radio thing, one of the interesting things is, back in the day when we had in ratings, when Arbitron was doing ratings, we had a diary method, which means Arbitron sent out this little diary. Literally, it was like a little small book, had each of the days on it. And your job was, you're supposed to write down what station you listened to at one point in time, okay? We were taught that in music radio, the first thing out of your mouth when a song's starting to fade out and you're coming in as the DJ, the first thing out of your mouth is the call letters. Because you want to sell those call letters, and you want to make sure that they know they're listening to Egbert KSLQ, Egbert 104.5, okay? Because of the fact that most people have no idea what they're listening to.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, unless they're what we call, there's various things in radio, so you're going to get your radio education here. There's what they call P1, P2, and P3 listeners. A P1 listener is this is very common with Casey. This is why Casey does so well. A P1 listener is a guy who works on a loading dock, and he has Casey playing 8 hours a day. And
Gotcha.
and even to the point where I can tell you, like, if you go to, there's a gas station in St. Charles County right there, the Circle K, right there on, that would be on Mid Rivers Mall Drive, across from, there's a new Barnes Hospital, early child care kind of place, and it's sort of catty corner from Skukuka, St. Charles Community College. You walk in that store, and they're playing Casey. Those listeners are, the people that work there are P1s. They listen all day long to Casey. P2 is the person who maybe has one or two favorite stations, maybe bounces around, and the P3 is the button pusher. He's driving down the highway.
In the car, just scanning whatever song he hears or voice he hears.
Right, hitting the scan button, pressing the presets, whatever, the kind of situation. And the idea behind that is most people, and what's interesting is me included, I can tell you things that I heard on the radio yesterday, but I can't remember which station I heard it on.
Yeah.
And to the point where, because I'm a button pusher, partly because that's what I do for a living, and I give the example of, if I owned a restaurant, I always give this example, which may be sort of stupid, but people will say, do you listen to, do you do one thing? And I always say, hey, you know what? The radio business is like the restaurant business. Every radio station has a different flavor, and your whole goal is to make those people come to your radio station or eat at your radio station, so to speak, on a regular basis. How do you do that? You give them certain things that are like, one guy I used to work for, he called it the thumb suck. The thumb suck is like the little baby kind of thing, that you feel comfortable with that. But the most important thing is, back in the day, you sell the callers. Now it doesn't make any difference anymore because of the fact that they're using this electronic system called the PPM, the personal people meter, where I won't go into that, but it's see, this is how the thing, when I hear these things, and I hear what you're saying, but my situation is, I say that to the average Joe, when they think Republican, I don't care who it is, when they think Republican, they're thinking, oh, that guy, gal, all they care about is abortion. All they care about is abortion. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, I understand. And I know we're over time here now. But also, if you're a Republican campaign consultant in Missouri and you were talking to Brad and John off the record, we're just hanging out, having an adult beverage, they would tell you, we're not emphasizing abortion this election. We're going to talk about how much it costs when you go to the grocery store and why that is the fault of the Democrats.
But the Dems are going to hit them over the head with the abortion thing. That's all they're going to do.
You're right about that.
Right. Okay, we have to take a break. It's 7:22.